Hello and welcome. If you have been here before, welcome back, and if you've not been here before, I have long awaited your arrival. Today we're going to be going over some tips and tricks from a crochet artist of 13 years. I've been crocheting for a minute, okay? And I've learned a lot in my time of doing that. I started when I was like 10 and I'm 23 now, so I did a little bit of knitting, a little bit of sewing, and a lot of crochet. With that being said, I have learned a fair amount of stuff through my years of crochet, tips and tricks and little things and do's and don'ts and all that jazz. And I feel like a lot of times when you are learning to crochet, you run into those problems. And I would like to be able to help people out to avoid running into those problems. That way they can progress their work a bit faster, not run into so many discouraging issues, and learn how to crochet for yourself, not just following patterns, not just doing things for other people, but learning to find your own style, learning to make things that you enjoy, and just overall things that genuinely make you happy to crochet. I ran out of room. We're purchasing. So obviously the first step of any project is buying everything, all the materials that you're going to need. So I just wanted to give you guys a few tips and tricks on purchasing stuff so that you can save money and actually get quality products. There is a variety of places that you can buy your crochet products. There's places like craft stores like Michael's or Joann. There's Walmart. I'm not sure if like any other places like Target have crochet stuff. I've never found it, but I know that the dollar store even has yarn and it's not bad. Places like Joann's and Michael's tends to have like sales. They'll do coupons very often. So if you're looking for the most bang for your buck, I would recommend going to a craft store. You can like order stuff online too. I like to feel my yarn before I buy it. So ordering through like Amazon or any other place that sells yarn is cool. I just prefer to feel my yarn first, and so if that were the case, I would want to know that I've already used that brand before ordering it, just so that I can have an idea of what I'm going to receive. Sometimes even the colors aren't accurate to what's on the website as well, so it's just good to make sure you know what you're buying if you're going to buy online versus buying in store. So when you get to the store, whether it's Walmart or craft store, there's very much likely going to be more value yarn than anything. Typically value yarn is made of acrylic. Sometimes it's acrylic and polyester. Sometimes it's just polyester, like recycled polyester. There's a lot of different kinds. But essentially, acrylic yarn is the main one that you're going to find, and that is going to be probably the most beginner-friendly yarn. If you are starting off crocheting, I would recommend getting stuff like this because it is pretty cheap. It's kind of soft, and it also comes in a very large skein, so you have a lot to work with essentially. You can stock up on this stuff and try out a bunch of different projects and kind of get a feel for crochet with this kind of stuff. The downside to acrylic yarn is that while it is value yarn, it is literally cheap. You can get better ones and worse ones, but most of it eventually will start to fall apart kind of. So if you want something that's long lasting, I don't recommend getting it. But like I said, if you're practicing, this is good yarn. I'm not sure how well you guys can see the yarn up close, but there is basically some like fraying on the string. This did not look like this when I bought it. With time, friction has caused this to kind of fall apart, and whether I leave it in a skein without using it or make something with it, that's going to happen. Especially if you do make something with the acrylic yarn, it is very likely to start falling apart once you wash it, once it gets some wear and tear. God forbid you put it in the dryer, it'll literally shrivel up basically. So you have to watch out when you get stuff like this. I make my keychains out of acrylic yarn because while they get wear and tear, nobody's really looking at it that close to see all the fuzziness that shows up. The next most common yarn that you'll likely find is going to be cotton yarn. This is the Lily Sugar and Cream brand. This is my preferred brand for when I'm making stuff to sell. I also like using things like this for just stuff that I want to be more durable. Maybe, you know, if you're not selling it, but you're making something for your mom, you know, you don't want it to fall apart over time. You want it to look like brand new. So stuff like this isn't really going to fray the way that the acrylic does, though all fabric essentially will start to do that eventually, especially if you leave it like with other fabrics, it starts to chafe. So the last time I went to the store, I found this Kobu yarn. They also have one called Trubu. It is bamboo yarn. This is half cotton, half bamboo. Then the Trubu one is just bamboo. This is very nice. I have not used it yet, but just at the looks of it, and what the label says, it is meant to be like temperature regulating. The fact that it's half cotton means it's durable, and the half bamboo gives it that like silky kind of nice soft touch. So if you want to make clothes or plushies out of something like this would be a good kind of product to use. It just does come in a bit of a small skein, and I think this was like $6 or $7. So it's not the cheapest yarn, but truthfully, if you want good yarn, you have to spend a bit of money. The final yarn that I'm going to go over is like specialty yarn, which is going to be stuff like this. Like this is like a crushed velvet. They have stuff like more plush. They have fuzzy yarn, you know, they've got all sorts of stuff. So things that aren't like typical looking like this are going to be considered specialty yarns. And I don't recommend these too much for beginners because I run into issues with these the most. Obviously, since it's got like a special texture, that's like expected, but that's not the problem. The problem is that this stuff breaks very easy. And I know what you're thinking, like, what are you doing, ripping your yarn apart? No, I'm not. I've put these in my purse and pulled them out with like 4 tangles in them to the point where when I tried to untangle them, it ripped the yarn. Look how easy it is to rip the yarn. I'll rip it for you. It looks kind of durable, right? It's like, oh, nice thick yarn, right? Wrong. You see how much it falls everywhere too? It makes a mess. It is very cheap. It literally will just fall apart on you. Like, it literally will just come apart. And truthfully, most people aren't mangling their yarn like that, but it's like accidents essentially. Like, oh, I put it in my purse and then it got all tangled, and then when I went to untangle it, the yarn ripped. I run into this issue a lot with this yarn, especially with skeins that I haven't even used yet. I'll be using them and I'll come across a knot in it and I'm like, okay, thanks. I didn't even do that, you know? So I just have issues with this kind of yarn for that reason. But other than that, these kinds of yarn can be really good for making like plush projects, for stuffed animals. Obviously it like has a really nice look to it, and if you are careful with it, it comes out great. I also want it to be known that you do not have to go to a craft store or even Walmart to find yarn. There is a lot at the dollar store as well as thrift stores. Now the dollar store is very small variety and most of the skeins are about this big, but it's usually all cotton yarn. I think I've seen some velvet, like plush yarn there before. I don't know. I don't buy from the dollar store typically, but that yarn is actually of decent quality. The only thing I run into with that is knots in the yarn, as if while they were spinning it, it ripped and they tied it together. But if you're paying $1 for a little thing of cotton yarn, you know, you can kind of weigh out the good and bad, and overall, it's worth your money if you're making something tiny. The thrift store, though, has so much yarn, you just have to look. I go regularly to check what they've got, and none of it's necessarily good yarn. It's a lot of acrylic yarn, it's a lot of just basic stuff, but if you are trying to start off and you don't have a lot of money, I would recommend going to the thrift store. They'll put like 3 different types of yarn in one bag and charge like $2 for it. And while none of them are like brand new skeins, it is a more affordable option. As well as if you are a crafter and you are looking for just materials in general, the thrift store has a lot of stuff. They have fabrics there. They have a lot of jewelry that you can take apart and use the beads for. They have things like picture frames. I really like framed granny square work. Just all of your crafting needs, go to the thrift store. You can even find buttons on shirts instead of going and paying $10 for buttons at the store. So the next material that you're going to need to crochet is going to be your crochet hooks. These are usually sold in a pack. They sell them one by one too. My recommendation to you is to keep every single thing that you buy. This is how much crochet hooks that I have. I have a pencil bag filled with them. And I have a few other things in here like needles, but all of it is crochet hooks. This is because these things get lost very easy. It's so easy to lose it on the couch, under your leg, in the car, in your purse, anywhere. Literally anywhere you can lose your crochet hook, and it doesn't always show back up. So I recommend having multiple of the same hook size. I have like 3 of these 6.5 hooks. I don't get rid of anything because when things go missing and you don't have something else to replace it, what, you're just gonna stop your project? Girl, bye. I have all of my knitting needles still. I literally keep like every single needle that I've ever encountered, because tiny things like these get lost, and they're not necessarily expensive, but they're not cheap either. You know, a pack of crochet hooks can be like 10 bucks and you only get 3 hooks. You know, so you want to make sure that you are hoarding essentially all of your craft supplies: scissors, craft glue, needles, thread, beads, even, you know, stuff to add embellishments. Keep all of it. Literally keep all of it. It's so annoying having to go buy stuff that you usually have laying around the house, which is also why I recommend going to the thrift store, because you can kind of stock up on even scrap yarn, or like ribbon and stuff, and you won't have to go buy it when you need it. So, moving on to the do's and don'ts of crochet, we're going to start off with the do's. The first thing I will always recommend to you before you start crocheting anything is stretching. And I know that sounds annoying and like you're probably going to mentally check out when I say that, but I cannot stress it to you enough how much stretching helps you. When you're working on a larger project, you tend to just kind of go into it and then you'll almost be done, but your wrists are like killing you. But you're like, no, I'm almost done, I'm just gonna push through. And then you get carpal tunnel and it's not fun. I used to have to wear a brace to sleep because I would crochet too much and too tight, like my stitching was too tight, to the point where my wrists were like in excruciating pain all the time, even in my sleep. So it is very important to make sure that you are stretching and doing like exercises essentially for your wrists, because crochet itself is an exercise. Here are some ways to stretch your wrists. Okay. So for the stretching before you crochet, I like to just get down on my knees with my hands facing flat on the floor. And what I'll do is I will lean forward so that it is extending this part of my wrist here with my body weight. And I'll just hold it for a while. And then I will flip my hands backwards like this. And I'll do the same stretch like that. And then afterwards, I will just do circles with my wrists 10 times, and then I'll do it the opposite direction another 10 times. You can also use things like heating pads to warm up your wrists, to kind of get them loose. And then when you do start crocheting, if you're going to be crocheting for a long time, I do recommend getting tension gloves. They are meant to, so they have some seams on the top, and you'll just put it over your hand like a glove. It's like a fingerless glove. It keeps tension up here on your wrist so that you're not pushing down so much when you're crocheting. It gives you like a balance almost, where it's like pulling you this way, so when you're pushing this way, you're not overstraining yourself. This is for the hardcore crochet girls, or anybody that's got maybe arthritis, joint pain, all that jazz. I recommend these. They come in different sizes. They're not too expensive at the store. You can order them too. This is an extra small, I believe. Do not get an extra small if your hands are bigger than a small. I know you wouldn't do that, but I'm very tiny and this is very tight because it is meant to be tense, but still after a while it can make where the thumb hole is and stuff, it starts to kind of feel too tight. So just make sure you get the right size. Another one of the very important do's of crochet is size gauging before you start a project, especially if it's something for somebody else, or like a clothing piece or something like that, because if you finish it and it's the wrong size, girl, you wasted a lot of time and you're gonna feel very dumb. So when you buy yarn, it's going to tell you the recommended hook size. So this is a pretty lightweight yarn. It is a 3, and they recommend that you use a 4mm hook. So typically like a regular cotton yarn like this kind uses a 5mm hook. So as you can see, this one is a little bit thinner and they recommend using a 4mm hook. You want to make sure that your hook size and your yarn weight go hand in hand, or else you'll end up with a piece that's very holey, kind of like see-through, or you will make it too tight and your stitches will be really hard to work through, which will contribute to the carpal tunnel pain. But there is nothing worse than making something and then it turning out the wrong size because the way the yarn stretches or the way that the hook was too small, and then you have to redo it and it's kind of a pain. And on the label for the yarn, it will tell you like how to size gauge. So it will tell you here you will do 18 stitches across for 20 rows, and that will give you a 4x4 of the fabric that you're going to be weaving essentially. Crochet comes with a lot of math, okay? I don't make the rules, okay? I just follow them sometimes. With size gauging in mind, it is important to learn the proper way to make things, like using the right hook size and giving yourself like a gauge to estimate things. But I'm also very, very for making your own patterns / freestyling. It can be really intimidating if you just started, but once you get the hang of crochet a little bit and you can make a beanie or you can make a couple granny squares, I would recommend trying to play around a bit and do something without a pattern, because that's how you're actually going to teach yourself. You have to make mistakes to be able to learn, and unfortunately, making mistakes while you crochet can be like almost devastating because it takes so long to do stuff. But if you don't allow yourself to make mistakes, you won't actually be like a skilled crocheter. You'll just be one that can kind of do things by the book, you know? And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes people like to do that. I like to compare it to a musician, kind of, who reads sheet music and plays it, versus somebody who can read sheet music and play it, but chooses to make their own stuff, you know? Both are fine. Both are great. Both make music. But one is a little bit more skilled with the creativity, and that's because you have to allow yourself to do that. So, moving on to the don'ts. I would like to start off with, if you are making a project and you notice, hey, this does not look right, stop right there, take it apart, and redo it. If you can't figure out what's wrong with it, but you know it looks wrong, take it apart and redo it. There is nothing worse than going through with it because you thought you could make it work when you knew it wasn't going to work, and then having to start all over. Trust me, it is such a pain to take things apart and redo it while you're sitting there trying to make a pattern or something, but it is a whole lot worse if you try to complete it and then you can't you can't even use it at all. It looks bad, you know, like it wasn't worth the time. So it's very important to stop, take a look, count your stitches, make sure you got the right amount of rows, make sure you're using the right stitch, make sure you didn't accidentally switch from using a half double crochet to a double crochet because your other project uses a double crochet. But if you notice something looks wrong and it's not that far away, go fix it. Even if it is kind of far away, fix it. If it's too far along, then I would scrap it, start over, and then use that yarn. But I would always recommend just take some time, count your stitches at the end of each row, make sure that you are doing your math correctly, because all it takes is a few missing stitches or a few extra ones to change the entire shape of your piece, to make it look bad, and to make you wish you never started it to begin with, okay? It's very discouraging. The next thing I would recommend is going back to the purchasing a bit. Do not buy so much yarn that you can't use it. I know it's fun to like go buy yarn when it's on sale and stuff, but a lot of times you will not use it, and then you will have all this yarn that eventually starts to fray, like the acrylic yarn. If you buy a bunch of yarn and it starts to look like this because you didn't use it in time, and then you don't want to use it because it doesn't look good anymore, then you've wasted your money essentially. It is important though that if you are going to buy a lot of one type of yarn, you're getting the same lot number and you are making sure that you have enough of it for the piece that you're making, because the last thing you need is to run out, go back to the store, buy more, and they don't have the color you need, or they don't have the lot number, so it's like a slightly different shade and then the whole piece is thrown off. You want to make sure that you are kind of calculating what you're going to need. If you're buying things just for fun, then it's okay to just kind of get one thing and test it out, see how you're feeling. But if you plan to make a piece, you need to have enough yarn for each. Now, if you are crocheting to learn so that you can make things for other people, you can sell things, all that, that's great, but do not make that like your whole purpose for crochet. Crochet is an art, and when you are an artist, you are not supposed to make art for other people. You're supposed to make it for yourself, essentially. Now, it's one thing, like I said, if you're trying to sell clothing or this and that to other people, but if you're not putting your own creative touch to it, you're essentially just doing work. And that's not necessarily what crochet is for, especially since it is such a slow process. It's meant to make you feel good. It's meant to almost speak to you. Even the color of yarn that you get is supposed to make you happy, you know? It's supposed to make you feel like what you're doing is something that you enjoy and that it is something productive still. When you start to only make things for other people who are asking, it's not fun anymore. And trust me, when you learn to crochet, people will flock to you to make them anything. Literally, I've had people ask me to make them blankets before. Girl, pick up a crochet hook and you make the blanket, and I'll see you in 6 years when it's done. Things like that aren't always a good thing to do, even if you are getting practice in, because you aren't working towards a goal for yourself. And people think that just because you can crochet, that means you are a machine who crochets for others. You are supposed to crochet for yourself, unless you make it your exact purpose to do things for other people. But crochet is meant to be something that speaks to you. And so if people flock to you, asking you to make them things, do not say yes to everything. Sometimes you might actually want to make that stuff. It'll be fun. That's cool. But if you feel in your heart, you're like, I don't want to make that. I don't like that person enough to put that much time in to make it. Don't do it. The second you start to do that, everybody thinks that's your job, okay? And it's not fun. Along with that, I would like to throw in, do not underprice your pieces, okay? If you are starting off and it maybe doesn't look amazing, obviously don't charge like a full, professional person price, But if you are making things that is taking you time and effort, you want to charge for that. Let's take this little bucket hat, for example. I made this, took me about 2.5 hours, give or take, and it's pretty basic looking though, It's cute, it looks good, it's well put together, but there's nothing like too fancy about it, which is why some people might look at the price and go, why would you charge that much for it? If you are a crochet artist who plans to sell, you need to get used to hearing that. A lot of people are used to fast fashion, they're used to buying their stuff off Shein, getting it in 2 weeks, and they only paid $3 for it, okay? That's not how it works when you're crocheting. You are actually putting a lot of time into stuff like this that you have to be very attentive with. You can't even watch TV sometimes because when you're sewing your pieces together, you're so glued to the piece that your neck starts to hurt. Do not undersell when that is the case. When I go on Depop and I look at what the price for something like this is, people are listing it for about $12. That sounds like a great price if you were to go to the store and buy a beanie. Yeah, you might be able to get one for around $12. It might be kind of basic, but that's just what you get in this country. Something like this that is handmade is not going to cost $12. So people who are selling their crochet products for cheap online just to sell are robbing themselves, essentially. Crochet is not something that you can just pump out a bunch of products of and sell for cheap and make money. You need to dedicate your time and work, and you need to charge yourself accordingly. There's nothing more unfair to yourself than to work hard on a piece and then sell it for cheap for somebody who already doesn't appreciate it enough. If somebody has an issue with your pricing on anything, don't sell to them. If your family is asking you for a family discount, don't sell to them. People who are supporting you are going to pay full price for your things and maybe even tip you. But if they can't afford to buy your things, they're going to help you spread word, they're going to recommend other people to you, they're going to help you grow your business. So if you start to rob yourself essentially by selling the things that you take a lot of time making for cheap, you essentially will never feel like the work you put in was worth it if you are constantly underselling yourself. This is why I say don't make things that you don't want to make. That makes crochet really not fun. You don't want to do that if you're trying to do this as a hobby or start like a small business. That is going to wrap up this video. If you guys enjoyed it, let me know in the comments down below. And if you have any suggestions for my next video, also let me know. I do plan on making another video like this, but focusing more on budget-friendly crocheting because I have a lot of tips and tricks that I did not include in this video just because it would be too long and I could make a video specifically for that. So if you guys would like that, give me a thumbs up and subscribe so that you can watch it when I do make it. I hope you guys were able to learn a few things from this video and use them to your advantage. I appreciate you all so much for watching my video and for coming to hang out with me. But yes, that is all that I have for you guys today. So I will see you next time if you care to come around.